Today, we're diving into a tense and startling incident that unfolded high above the North Atlantic, an encounter that pushed military nerves to the edge and set off a wave of global reactions. We're talking about a Russian spy ship targeting a UK Air Force plane and the unexpected chain of events that followed. What seemed like a routine surveillance flight turned into a moment of intense international scrutiny, raising big questions about airspace control, military preparedness, and the razor-thin line that separates strategic maneuvering from open confrontation. This incident didn't just stay between the two aircraft. It sent ripples across Europe and the rest of the world, forcing governments, analysts, and defense officials to rethink how these encounters are handled in an age of rising geopolitical tension. The story begins early in the morning when a Royal Air Force Rivet joint aircraft took off for what was supposed to be a standard intelligence gathering mission over international waters. These flights are common and part of routine NATO operations designed to monitor unusual military activities, movements of ships, strategic missile deployments, and any unexpected signals that might indicate a shift in behavior. But on this particular day, something unusual was already happening beneath the clouds. A Russian AGI spy ship was sailing closer than normal to the boundary lines where most nations prefer to keep distance. It had been monitored for days due to its suspicious navigational patterns, irregular radio silence, and the fact that it lingered in an area where it normally wouldn't be. As the RAF aircraft approached the broader region for its scheduled sweep, the Russian vessel began adjusting its path. At first, it seemed like a coincidence. After all, ships change course for many reasons, but analysts watching the live feed at RAF Waddington quickly realized the ship wasn't just adjusting its direction randomly. It was shadowing the trajectory of the RAF plane from the surface. This raised immediate suspicion. Russian intelligence ships are notorious for eavesdropping on military communications, intercepting electronic signals, and gathering high-value data. Yet targeting an aircraft directly, especially one belonging to NATO, goes beyond standard surveillance etiquette and edges toward deliberate provocation. Within minutes, the RAF crew reported unusual signal interference. Systems that normally run smoothly began picking up electronic noise, suggesting jamming attempts. Electronic warfare experts later analyzed the data and confirmed that the ship was emitting pulses designed to disrupt airborne sensors. This is where things took a dramatic turn. The interference wasn't just static, it was directional. Someone on the Russian vessel was actively targeting the aircraft systems, probing to see how resilient they were under pressure. This wasn't accidental, it was calculated. Back at base, commanders elevated the threat level. The RAF aircrew tightened their formation and shifted to encrypted backups designed for exactly this kind of hostile engagement. The pilots knew that any misstep could escalate tensions in an instant, especially when dealing with adversarial nations that test boundaries regularly. But what they didn't expect was for the Russian ship to take things even further. As the Rivet joint maintained its course, the Russian vessel locked onto its flight path with what analysts believe was a fire control radar. This type of radar is used to guide weapons. Pointing it at another nation's aircraft is equivalent to placing a finger on the trigger. The moment that signal was detected, alarms went off inside the RAF aircraft. The crew executed a defensive maneuver, broke formation, and switched to evasive protocols. This wasn't just an intimidation tactic anymore, it crossed into potential engagement territory. The UK Ministry of Defence was notified instantly. Satellite feeds were redirected. NATO command centers were alerted. Everything moved fast. What had been a surveillance mission had now turned into a confrontation. Then something unexpected happened. A Norwegian F-35 Lightning Roman II, already airborne for a separate patrol, was redirected to intercept the situation. This wasn't planned, but it was possible due to the shared intelligence network NATO relies on. The F-35 streaked toward the area, using its stealth capabilities to stay undetected until it was already close. When it arrived, the dynamic shifted dramatically. The Russian ship, which had been aggressive only moments earlier, immediately backed off its targeting systems. Its radar signatures dropped. Its electronic pulses ceased. It was as if someone had flipped a switch on board the vessel. Observers watching from NATO headquarters later suggested the Russian crew had not expected such a rapid response or the presence of a fifth-generation fighter jet capable of voiding their electronic warfare advantages. The F-35 didn't need to fire a shot. Its presence alone was enough to neutralize the situation. With its advanced sensors, it gathered high-clarity data, monitored the ship's activities, and positioned itself in a way that signaled unmistakably. Any further escalation would be met with overwhelming force. However, the story didn't end there. What happened next shocked defense analysts. The Russian ship suddenly changed course, not toward home, but into a tighter loop that pushed it even closer to the UK aircraft's operational zone. This was bold, too bold to be a simple error. Radio intercepts later revealed that the ship had received new instructions from a command center that analysts believe was in Kaliningrad. Whatever those instructions were, they seemed to urge the vessel to continue its pressure tactics despite the F-35's presence. But the UK aircraft wasn't alone anymore. Within minutes, additional NATO assets began moving toward the region. A U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon, already patrolling nearby waters, joined the surveillance. A Danish F-16 was scrambled to add aerial coverage. The situation evolved into a full multinational monitoring response. This overwhelming show of force placed the Russian ship in a position where any further provocation could spark a global crisis. The vessel's crew hesitated. Everyone watching felt the tension through the live data streams. Then came the incident that flipped the narrative entirely. As the Russian ship attempted to alter its position once again, it executed a sharp maneuver that analysts later described as dangerously careless. The ship's own electronic warfare pulses bounced back against its hull due to incorrect directional calibration. Essentially, the interference it was sending outward began affecting its own equipment. Multiple systems on board were temporarily disrupted, including navigational sensors, forcing the vessel to halt its aggressive posture and stabilize itself. It was a self-inflicted electronic misfire. This mistake changed the entire dynamic. The ship could no longer track the RAF aircraft effectively. It couldn't continue its jamming attempts. Its radar became unreliable. In other words, the intimidation attempt backfired spectacularly. At that point, the UK aircraft, assessing that the immediate threat had diminished, resumed its original mission. The F-35 maintained a protective orbit overhead, ensuring the Russian vessel would not try anything reckless again. International reaction came quickly. The UK condemned the incident publicly, calling it a dangerous provocation that violated long-established norms of military engagement over international waters. NATO allies echoed the same sentiment, describing the targeting of an Allied aircraft as unacceptable. Defense analysts pointed out that Russia has increasingly used such tactics to test the readiness and reactions of NATO forces. But in this case, the rapid response and accidental misfire by the Russian ship turned the situation into an embarrassing setback for the Kremlin. Behind closed doors, several intelligence agencies later confirmed that this event helped NATO gather unprecedented data on Russian electronic warfare capabilities. The misfired pulse revealed vulnerabilities in the ship's systems that analysts had never seen before. What began as a hostile move from the Russian side ended up giving NATO valuable insights that could shape future defense strategies. In a way, the incident offered more benefits to the UK and its allies than it did to Russia. Meanwhile, the RAF crew successfully completed their mission, even though part of it had to be rerouted due to the confrontation. The pilots later said the moment the fire control radar locked onto them was one of the most intense experiences of their careers, but they emphasized that the training and preparation they undergo for these scenarios are precisely what kept the situation from spiraling out of control. As news of the incident spread, global media outlets highlighted the evolving nature of modern aerial and maritime conflicts. Today, encounters are no longer just about physical weapons, but also digital warfare capabilities, electronic interference, and intelligence battles fought through frequencies and signals. What makes these incidents dangerous is not just the threat of physical confrontation, but the unknown variables. How electronic disruptions can affect aircraft operations, how rapidly escalation can occur, and how miscalculations can lead to unintended consequences. The incident also sparked debates within the UK government about increasing patrol frequencies, strengthening electronic shielding on aircraft, and updating counter-jamming measures. Several members of Parliament called for a reassessment of the UK defensive posture in the North Atlantic, arguing that the region has become a focal point for Russian probing missions. Meanwhile, Russia publicly denied the incident, calling it a misinterpretation of routine activity, while privately adjusting several operational guidelines for ships in similar missions. What happened that day is a perfect example of how thin the line is between surveillance and confrontation, between gathering intelligence and provoking conflict, between showcasing military capability and accidentally revealing weaknesses. It also showed how nations react under pressure and how quickly they can mobilize when one of their assets is threatened. The presence of the F-35 was a turning point, a silent but powerful statement that the UK and its allies would not tolerate open intimidation. As more details surfaced, defense experts emphasized that these encounters will likely become more common in the coming years. With global tensions rising, nations are pushing each other's limits more aggressively, testing boundaries and probing defenses. The Russian spy ship incident wasn't an isolated act. It was part of a broader pattern that includes aerial intercepts, maritime standoffs, and cyber confrontations. The world is watching closely because each one carries the risk of sparking something much bigger. In the days that followed, military analysts continued to dissect the event frame by frame. They highlighted how crucial the RAF crew's composure was, how decisive the NATO response had been, and how unexpected the Russian vessel's misfire turned out to be. Some even suggested that the incident might influence how future NATO missions are coordinated, with more joint patrols and earlier interception thresholds. The real takeaway from this incident is how quickly a single moment can escalate. A ship locking its sensors onto a plane is not just a gesture, it's a potential act of aggression. Yet that act, combined with a technical error, ended up undermining the very advantage Russia sought to demonstrate. Instead of showcasing dominance, it exposed weaknesses. Instead of intimidating NATO, it provoked a coordinated response. Instead of remaining a quiet event between two forces, it became global news. As the UK continues to monitor foreign military activity near its airspace, one thing is clear: these encounters are part of the modern landscape of international power struggles. What happened that day in the North Atlantic will be studied, discussed, and referenced for years to come. It's a reminder that even in an era dominated by sophisticated technology, human decisions, errors, and reactions still shape the realities of conflict. The RAF aircraft eventually returned to base without further interference, and the F-35 disengaged once the threat fully subsided. But the lessons learned, the data gathered, and the political fallout continued to unfold long after the aircraft landed. The incident became a case study in military readiness, electronic warfare, and international diplomacy under pressure. The world may not have seen actual combat that day, but it witnessed something just as significant: how close two military forces came to a dangerous escalation, how a single technological mistake changed the outcome, and how quickly global powers respond when a line is crossed. This is the new battlefield, invisible, immediate, and unpredictable. And that's the full breakdown of the Russian spy ship targeting a UK Air Force plane and the surprising events that followed. If you found this deep dive into military strategy and real-world tension informative, make sure to stay tuned. There's always more happening behind the scenes, and we'll be here to bring it to you first.